Hello, I'm Dennis Woltering. Marcia is off tonight. By now we have heard the reports of casualties and destruction from Wednesday's tornadoes. Tonight we'll look at the science, including the difference between local tornadoes and those in other places, and why some destinations seem to be more likely targets. There has been a whirlwind at the New Orleans Police Department, not only over who the next police chief will be, but the method of selection. And we'll also look at the Saints, who come out of their bye week perhaps close to saying bye to the playoffs, and possibly to a coach or two, and who have been accused and fined by the NFL for a player allegedly faking an injury. Those topics, plus a look at the rise of a triple threat, COVID, flu, and respiratory virus, just in time for the holidays. All of this on the map for our Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Mark Schleifstein, environmental reporter for the Times-Picayune New Orleans Advocate. Dawn Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. And Jeff Duncan, sports columnist, the New Orleans Times-Picayune. And we'll start, Mark, with you about the tornadoes. What a rough week, what a rough day it was the other day. I mean, very scary to watch those things come in, and the devastation just phenomenal.
It is a very difficult situation, and I know one of the first questions I got was, well, gee, what does this mean? And, you know, 2 Decembers in a row, does that mean that we're seeing some huge amount of increase in tornadoes in December? And the answer is no. Actually, December is actually a fairly small number of tornadoes. Tornadoes occur any time during the year, but in South Louisiana, in Louisiana in general, a fairly small number on normal year. What happened this time is basically what happens every winter. We have a frontal system coming down. A low pressure system drags air from Canada, cold air from Canada down to the Gulf Coast. This particular storm ended up with a frontal line of storms that was formed in front of the cold front portion of it that grabbed warm air coming up from the Gulf of Mexico and created these tall thunderstorms that spun off tornadoes. And that's basically a simplistic way that this stuff happens, you know, pretty normal. Now, the other question that really is out there is, well, gee, there's been some question about whether or not the tornado alley effect is moving east. And what I've heard, even from one of the researchers who wrote the first article that said that that might be true, is that it's still very unclear whether or not that's really happening. But if it is happening, it's happening to the north and east of New Orleans. So again, what happened the last couple of years with these tornadoes in the New Orleans area is just really serendipity as far as we can tell.
But we had this one tornado that seemed to be almost replicate what happened last March, going through Gretna, Algiers, and then jumping over to St. Bernard Parish.
And that's basically just because of the way these frontal systems work and the direction that the storms are going in. If it were just a thunderstorm, it would have been exactly the same sort of a thing. It's just luck of the draw.
But Mark, isn't it true that we're used to seeing on television the type of hurricanes the tornadoes that you see like in Kansas and Nebraska, you know, the big funnel cloud. We don't have that kind. Isn't it true that we have more?
Well, right. I mean, even that, you know, we saw the paths that occurred for yesterday's storms and the storm last year. They were a couple of miles long, but they weren't 20 to 30 to 40 miles long the way that they could be in the Midwest and as had occurred last year in Alabama. That's, you know, it just doesn't happen.
So how many confirmed tornadoes did we have this time?
Well, they're still trying to figure that out. My understanding is that there's still a team looking at the North Shore to see. So far, they have confirmed 3, the 2 here in the New Orleans area, and then 1 on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And then, of course, there was 3 out of the Lake Charles area. And at least 3 in the Shreveport area on Tuesday.
I heard one meteorologist, Alexandra Cranford, was saying that we had an especially unstable atmosphere because of warm weather the day before these things hit.
Exactly. We had a couple of days running up before this storm where we actually had warm and humid weather, and that just one of the things that sort of hit me when they started talking about the forecasting on what's called the National Weather Service chat forum is that they started talking about how it's clear to the west of where we're looking right now, that's a really bad sign. And I'm like, uh-oh, what that means is that they're getting the sun coming in that's heating up the ground, that's causing air to rise, and that rising air is going to capture that humidity and create these tall thunderstorms, and that's where you get the start. And then on top of that, you had a jet stream going right over top of some of those thunderstorms that was just twisting it and pulling it up farther, and that's what causes the tornado.
Well, when we see some common areas like Araby and on the west coast, in the West Bank of Jefferson Parish, it makes people say, well, what is it about this area? I mean, or is it just coincidence that they happen in the same areas?
So, you talk to the experts, and they say there's a couple of reasons for that. One is just because they happen to be in the way, but the other is because we keep putting things in their way that are easy to destroy. And especially in the Kelowna area, what we had was mobile homes being hit, and they're not made for tornadoes. Regular houses aren't made for tornadoes in Louisiana. In the Midwest, they now have safe rooms, but we don't have that yet here.
And we don't have basements. I mean,
no, there are no basements for us to hide in.
Yeah, it's very difficult to find a safe place to be. Actually, I guess a bathroom is a good place. Bathtub. That's about it.
Okay. Drag a mattress over you.
All right,
Okay.
Jeff. Let's move on to you and talk about the Saints, who have, in my view, been sometimes painful to watch. I mean, I love watching these guys when they win and when they're scoring and stuff like that. But my God, what's going on?
It's a very, very disappointing season. I think everybody thought this team had much greater expectations, much greater potential. I know I took a survey of the local media before the season, 27 different media representatives, and no one picked a losing season. So we were all drinking the Kool-Aid, I think.
Was it more like 500?
Yeah, no, we were all
well
above. A lot of people just above 500, but it just shows you, I mean, there were great expectations. I think the team, the players, the coaches felt the same way. And it just hasn't come together. There's been a lot of factors involved. I think injuries, every team in the league, of course, deals with that. The quarterback injury early in the year kind of set in motion a little bit of a quarterback carousel between Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston. This is a quarterback-driven league. We know that. We saw it with Drew Brees here, how great he was, and I think we're learning now the hard way what life is like without a franchise quarterback. Some people might have forgotten that because the Saints always struggled to get one before Drew Brees. And I just think they've had one of those seasons, Dennis, where things have not played out. They've had a lot of bad luck. They've lost a lot of games at the end, like this Tampa Bay game a week ago that was really a heartbreaking loss for them the way they lost it at the very end. So it has not been a good year. They're basically eliminated from the playoffs. Mathematically, they're still alive. They have a 1% chance, less than 1%. So more than likely, they're playing kind of out the string at this point of the season.
I want to ask you about the coaching staff, but you mentioned the quarterbacks. I mean, do we need a new quarterback? Is that part of the issue here?
Well, I think so, and I think they knew that this was going to be a little bit of a transition. The roster itself is loaded with veteran players. One of the problems in the NFL with the salary cap is once you start paying players on their second contracts, it really becomes difficult to keep a lot of good players intact. And the Saints moved, of course, Drew Brees retired, and so they tried to get away with paying lesser at the quarterback position because their money is invested in all these other positions. And they thought the roster around the quarterback would be strong enough to carry this team, the defense, the running game. I understood why they decided to do that, but it just hasn't worked out. They haven't been as good on defense. They haven't been as good in the running game. They haven't been as good in any area. And that's exposed the quarterback position.
And they haven't been as good in the fitness thing. What's the deal with Michael Thomas? Is he going to ever come back?
He's just had bad luck with injuries, really kind of fluky injuries, all different ones to his foot, to his ankle. And this is a guy they invested $20 million a year in, and they've really gotten nothing out of him the last 3 years. And it's not just him. This year, Marcia Lattimore, their top cornerback, has been out with a lacerated kidney, a very unusual football injury. Alvin Kamara has not been very productive. That's another player, was a core player. So the players they're paying, they invested in to be a part of their core, they've really gotten very little out of this season.
What about the coaching staff? I mean, is Dennis Allen in place for another year or two because they've already, paid him, signed him to a contract?
Well,
or not?
I don't know how many years he has on his contract. That's one thing no one's been able to report. I'd say it's definitely a multi-year deal. I would think Dennis Allen is safe unless things really go sideways here the last 4 games of this season. Then I think all bets would be off if this team lost their last 4 games, which would mean a 6-game losing streak. But knowing Gail Benson, knowing Mickey Loomis, their track record is of loyal support. They value stability and continuity, and turning over a coach after 1 year just would not be their method of operation.
What about other members of the coaching staff?
Well, I definitely think we'll see some changes, especially to the offensive side of the ball. That's the area that's really struggled. And if I'm internally looking at this team and how do we sell it to the local fan base next year, if you're not going to change the head coach, you're going to have to sell offensive coaching changes, bring in maybe a high-profile offensive coach, maybe change quarterbacks and say, hey, the defense is okay. This is why we think we're going to be better. We're going to change the offense.
Real fast, we did have the allegation that one of the players, Cam Jordan, I believe, faked
Yes.
an injury and the Saints were fined. Can you tell us about that? Was that real? Did he fake or not?
I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows except Cam Jordan and the coaching staff. It's a tactic that's been used for years in the NFL. I don't think in this instance it adds up. I know the Saints obviously are appealing it. They're going to fight it. I don't know how successful they'll be, but it was a exorbitant fine, hundreds of thousands of dollars. The NFL's trying to crack down across the league. It wasn't just the Saints that got hit with some of these fines. Other teams also got it, but not at the level of New Orleans. And if I'm Cam Jordan, I definitely want to fight it because it strikes to your name and
Integrity.
Your integrity, exactly.
Yeah, all right. Errol, what about the police chief? I mean, Sean Ferguson is leaving. Now they have to replace him, and the police have been in a
this
very
week
difficult
coming
position.
up is going to be a major week. Could be a chief week too, as well as a major week. But anyway, as far as the process in the future, Ferguson leaves on the 22nd, and so something's got to be resolved between now and the 22nd. The council sent a letter to the mayor, replying to her request for what do you think we should be doing, and they said, well, appoint an interim chief. Well, I think that was a given. Have a nationwide search, and that seems to be the point of contention. Then appoint a committee, not of council members, but of also citizens to consider all these nominees, and then to have a process once you got the nominees for the council to make a recommendation to the mayor. That process hasn't been created lately. I mean, the amendment that allowed for this new appointment system was only a couple months ago. And one thing they were going to do, well, we have a chance, we're going to develop a process. Then all of a sudden this came, okay?
Right.
And so they needed a process in a hurry. But this is a bad time because it's going to be hard to select a police chief. It takes a long time to do that. I mean, it takes months to select it. I heard an interview with the head of the police union actually on WBL radio, and he was predicting that for all the people that are dropping out of the police department, that the number is going to escalate in March. Why? Because they have all these bonus payments that are coming. So a lot of people are waiting until they get their bonus payments, and then after that, they're going to be dropping out, but that they're really unhappy. And so if they're looking, and especially if the mayor just goes ahead and says, well, we don't care what you think, here's the police chief, and if they're not happy with that, that's going to be a real bad time. We're going to lose a lot of police personnel. And
police morale is at a low level as well. I mean, does this look like an attractive position for someone who's looking to be a police chief someplace?
I don't know. But I got to tell you, if you ask police about their morale, they'll always say it's not good, okay? I mean, it's to their advantage, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not talking about New Orleans, I'm talking about anywhere in the world.
Right.
No police want to say, hey, we're happy, okay? And so, but yeah, it probably is. I mean, I could see reasons why it would be. And the person who's being talked about, that the mayor is going to, thinking about appointing, Jeanette Williams, she's a 20-year veteran, but she hasn't been out in the field. I mean, you know, she's not one of the cops out in the courts. She's more of an administrator. And so I think that that's going to weigh heavily on the police too.
And there's also some people, you know, want to have a nationwide search.
Yeah, well, left the key thing, doing a nationwide search. Twice in modern times we've had nationwide searches, and the most successful was Chief Pennington,
Right.
who we got out of Washington State. He was a huge success. He did very well, and so he is a good example for that. Before that, there was Chief Parsons, who Dutch Morial appointed, and he started off really good, but there was problems at the end with shootings and in Algiers, and so it didn't end well. But overall, the two who were part of a national search, and some people will argue that in a sense, Ronnie Surpass, who was local, he was there already, but they had a national search and said, oh, well, go to Surpass. And he was successful. And so if you look at the three examples we have, the product was okay. Okay to good. Okay.
So, but this is a work in progress, and it has to be done pretty quickly.
Well, the progress better be started like sometime this
Yesterday.
week. You know?
Yeah. Don, so we had COVID, we had the flu, and now we have a respiratory virus. So what's going on?
We've got what doctors call a triple-demic. Last year at this time we were talking about a two-demic, bidemic with COVID and the flu. This year we've got RSV mixed in there too. RSV is simply respiratory syncytial virus. It's what causes common cold-like symptoms, but it's more dangerous in the very young and in the very old. For instance, in the United States, it accounts for 58,000 to 80,000 hospitalizations for kids, and it's the leading cause of pneumonia for kids under 1. So it's real dangerous for them and real dangerous for the elderly. We also have rhinovirus circulating, adenovirus circulating, parainfluenza circulating. I asked why, like what's going on, and a lot of it's because we're not using the same mitigation efforts we were before with COVID. We're not masked, we're gathering more inside, and it's nationwide. In the weeks since Thanksgiving, COVID cases and hospitalizations are up 40% around the country. That's around the country. They're not as bad here, but they're getting there. The case count is higher, but the hospitalizations aren't there yet. And with the case count, you don't really know who has it unless that person has gone to the doctor or an urgent care or somewhere else to get tested. If you're just testing at home, nobody knows you've got COVID unless you're telling them you've got COVID. So all three are absolutely going around again, and they predict they will only get worse because we'll all be gathering for the holidays, and it's going to be colder than it's been in months, and people will be indoors. So it really is the same old rules we've been talking about, that no one seems to want to listen to. Wash your hands, don't touch your nose and your eyes and your mouth, avoid close contact with sick people, cover your coughs and sneezes, not with your hand, but with your arm, and also stay home when you're sick. Like, just don't go out when you're sick. But the good news for especially the flu and COVID is there are treatments for them now. RSV, there's not. It's common cold-like virus. There's the stuff to help with the symptoms, but there aren't cures. There actually are working, functioning medications for COVID and the flu now, but you have to get them in time. So the best advice from doctors right now is if you're feeling ill, get in touch with your doctor, get tested so you can find out what you have, because all of these medications work better if you get them within the first 5 days. You can get Zofluza or Tamiflu for the flu. You can get on Paxlovid for COVID, and you actually can get to feeling better and shortening the duration of the illness.
Can you get all three of these things?
You can. You can get them all at the same time, and and they were worried about it last year with the flu and COVID, and now they are seeing people with all three at one time. And not only that, you can get them multiple times. I talked specifically to Dr. Fred Lopez today about the flu shot, and he said if you haven't gotten it yet and you've already gotten the flu, still go get your flu shot, because the shot covers 4 different strains of the flu, and when any of us get sick with the flu, we're sick by one strain. So we still are at risk for catching those other 3. So in one season, we could conceivably get the flu 4 times. So yeah, you can get them all at the same time, and then you're in real danger. And we end up at a point where you stress the medical system, and you're stressing the beds and the availability of medical care. We're not there yet, but that's the fear as we get deeper into the holidays and more sick people are traveling. If you are traveling, they say you really should mask up.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask about that. Are medical professionals talking about the need to start masking again?
Actually, in New York and Los Angeles, they are talking about mask mandates again, potentially, because the viruses are spreading so big there. As we're all traveling to different parts of the country with family, they say absolutely, put a mask on. They actually do work. The most contagious of those three viruses is COVID, because the particles stay in the air longer than anything else, and it's spread by coughs and sneezes and that sort of thing. But RSV and the flu are spread the same way too. So if it works, if that mask is going to work for COVID, it's going to work for the other two also.
And it looks like COVID is with us. This isn't going away,
No,
right?
it will go from pandemic to endemic, and we will just be dealing with it and different strains, and it is mutating and mutating and mutating. And the quote, I think, was "the mutants are everywhere," that I heard today. And then with the flu too, there's apparently a famous line among the doctors who study these kind of diseases that if you've seen one flu season, usually you'd think the end of that line was you've seen them all. It's actually, if you've seen one flu season, you've seen one flu season. It doesn't operate the same way twice. So every year it's different. Every year the strains that come out and affect us are different. This year the vaccine for it is apparently quite good at being matched with the virus that's spreading among us.
All right. So, Jeff, we have had some good news on the sports front.
Yes.
I mean, Tulane won the AAC championship, and they kept Willie Fritz, which is a big deal, and the Pelicans are looking great.
Yeah, so I'm glad to talk about some positive ones. I mean, donkey downer is what I've been labeled a few times. But no, the Tulane story is one of the best stories in the nation. All of college football, they're going to a New Year's Day Bowl for the first time in 80 years.
Yeah.
Just doesn't happen very often. The job that Willie Fritz and his staff have done, I think he's probably going to win the National Coach of the Year this year. And retaining him, Georgia Tech made a very hard run to try and hire him away. He almost took it. He was very serious about it. And Tulane was able to keep him on board. That's something they've not been able to do in the past. They've typically been a launching pad.
How did they do that?
Well, they stepped up and committed to maybe building some facilities down the road on campus. They helped him out in his contract. I mean, he's going to make a little more money. His coaching
But
staff.
they couldn't match Georgia Tech, right?
No, but they're going to pay his assistants more. Willie, at this stage, he's 62. He wants to win. He's not worried so much about his own pocketbook. He wants to be successful. And they're trying to put in place some of those factors that will help him be successful down the road. And look, they're playing Southern California in the Cotton Bowl. This was a team, let me just make it clear, they were picked 7th, Tulane was, in preseason in their 11-team conference. Not only did they win the conference, but they're now going to a New Year's Day bowl game. And this is a magical season. Right. This does not happen. The Pels, on the other hand, we all had expectations for them. I think they've arrived a little quicker than even we all thought. And they've done it with one of their best players, Brandon Ingram, largely being injured for the last couple of weeks. They've gone on this incredible run to get to first place in the Western Conference. He's going to be coming back soon. And I think what we've seen in the interim is Zion Williamson, the young superstar, really coming into his own, and I think really maturing into a dominant player. And this team's young. I mean, they're going to be around for a while. And that's the difference in this team and, say, some of the past Pelicans teams where they've tended to kind of have spikes of success and then they drop off. This team's kind of built for the long haul and sustained success. It's an exciting time to be a Pelicans fan.
And there have been times that we've hit our superstar like Chris Paul, but they were never happy. I mean,
Yeah.
and then they want to move on. Or the Pelican star is happy as far as you can tell.
Yes, and they're also contractually locked
Obligated
up.
to be happy.
Yeah, exactly. They're making a lot of money. They should be happy. But no, I get your point, Errol. We've lost a lot of these players to other larger markets. I will say this about Zion Williamson. He's wired a little differently. Wired more like Tim Duncan, the former star for the Spurs. I think he likes being in a market this size. I don't think he's got his eye on New York City or Los Angeles or these big, bright lights. He's from Spartanburg, South Carolina. I think he likes the smaller market, and I know he's very happy right now with the way this team's winning.
Is the franchise doing okay financially?
Yes. And I heard this past week that they're really not interested in moving to try and get a new arena. They're happy at the Smoothie King Center. Their lease is up there next year, and there was a lot of talk of maybe putting an arena down near the convention center. I think that's tabled for now. Even if this team is successful, I don't think the organization wants to push for that right now.
How would you describe the atmosphere at the Pelicans game?
No, it's electric right now.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. It's a different crowd than a Saints game. It's a younger, younger demographic. but people go there to have a good time. They do a great job with the Pelicans.
Well, like a party, you were
Yeah,
saying.
they have halftime entertainment, local music a lot. They've really done a great job with their in-game entertainment. It's a great place to take family and kids, and you can get in, at least for now, still at a pretty decent price. They have some of the lowest, most affordable tickets in the league.
Okay. Errol, you have some news about a former colleague passing.
Well, the predecessor to this show, going back into the 1970s, was a program called City Desk. And that was like this. It was people sitting around the table, except they were all part of the stateside newspaper. Charlie Ferguson, the editor, was the moderator. But one of the regulars who was on almost every week was Alan Katz. And I used to watch the show faithfully. I was in awe of it. Alan Katz, and so I really got to know him from watching City Desk. But he also had a column in the Picayune. And what made him kind of a model for me is that he was the first guy I was aware of who wrote about not just politics, but who could write about sports and business and theater and integrated it all. And I thought, well, this makes sense because government is not just people running for office; it's all these other factors too. And I really enjoyed his approach to writing. So he was a very important journalist for many years. After a while, he went in a different direction. He went into consulting, and I appreciated his impact. Anyway, he died this week, and he lingered for a while, but he certainly had a perspective on the news that you seldom saw.
All right. Looking ahead, Mark, what do you see happening in the next few days?
Well, we're going to see a major thing happening. Next week, the Army Corps of Engineers is going to issue its record of decision on the Mid-Barataria sediment diversion. So we'll know whether or not that thing gets a move forward by the Corps, gets the permits that it needs to spend the $2 billion to build it. So that's the key one.
That could be important.
Yep.
Dawn, what about you?
It takes about 2 weeks for vaccines to take full effect, so you've got time for your New Year's celebrations if you want to go get the latest COVID or flu
And it's
shot.
important to get these vaccines.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff?
Well, we all know Arch Manning, right? The grandson of Archie, son of Cooper and Ellen. His last day of high school, Friday the 16th. He's the first Newman student ever to graduate early. He's off to the University of Texas here in the next couple of weeks to start his college career. A lot of eyeballs will be on his college career.
And he'll be going pro pretty soon, huh? I mean, you think he'll go all through college or not?
I would say he'll be out in 3 years and on to the NFL.
All right. And that's our Informed Sources for today. Thanks for you guys for joining us. Thanks to you at home for joining us again. And we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources.